I was doom scrolling on Facebook the other day, as I often find myself doing when I am either bored or can't deal with the universe as it is right now. And I follow a lot of different pages that have different hobby things. So different hobby groups that are building and painting models. A lot of them are 40K related. A lot of other ones aren't. So there's just a variety of different miniatures and games that people have, from D&D miniatures to different games like Flames of War and the such like that, or even historical wargaming. And I was looking at some of the models that they had there, and I have had experience and exposure to a lot of these different games. And I was thinking about all the different games that GW itself has, let alone games like companies like Mantic, or any of the other different kinds of wargaming companies that put out miniatures and rule books and sets. And then you have people like Blackmagic Craft and Uncle Adam putting out rules for their own game systems that are, miniature agnostic. And I guess Blackmagic Craft is putting out his own, so check those all out. And it made me realize something, that all of this is wargaming. All of this is miniature wargaming. You are battling groups of miniatures against each other with a set of rules that are determined by dice. And all of it, when you see people doing it, you have a kinship to them. And it started to make me think, what are the essential parts of a wargame? And a lot of the essential parts of wargaming are, you have to have war. You have to have gaming. You have to have something that you are battling each other out on the tabletop with physical entities with rule sets, usually rolling dice to determine, sometimes flipping cards, doing whatever. But that's essentially what it comes down to. And I started to think, with all of this in mind, what do you have to do to make sure that you are doing this hobby correctly? And I thought of 5. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek video. Today I'm coming to you with my 5 keys to wargaming. These are 5 key things that you have to keep in mind whenever you are wargaming. And it doesn't matter which system you are currently playing, which system you have played in the past, which system you want to play in the future. These are 5 keys that will be important to you as a wargamer in general, not as a 40K player, not as an AOS player, not as a Flames of War player. And these 5 keys, I think, are important to keep in mind throughout your experience in wargaming, so that you can go forward with this and get the most out of it. So the first thing that you have to keep in mind as a wargamer is that it's a game. If you forget that it is a game, you are forgetting literally half of its namesake, wargaming. And it's an important half to remember, because there are no lives at stake with what we do for our hobby. Even if your job is to do wargaming, be it painting, building, producing, going to our tournaments, coaching, even in those cases where your literal livelihood is based upon wargaming, it is still just a game. And no one's life is dependent upon these games. So if you find yourself becoming just super angry and you feel the power of Khorne flowing through because of this, you need to take a step back and understand that if the Allies do not win the Normandy beach invasion in your game of Flames of War, it doesn't mean that the Allies actually lost the invasion. You are just playing a game, and that tomorrow you could play the exact same scenario and no one will be any worse for wear. So keep that in mind, because it's an important aspect of making it a hobby and making it something enjoyable and making it something that you want to do and keep doing, and provide the stress release that it is meant to be. And there are a lot of aspects of wargaming that people talk about, like, oh, well, I build it because I have to. I paint it because I have to. I read these, I go through this different steps, and I have to, I follow all the FAQs because I have to. And perhaps you do. Depending upon what your group is, maybe there are things that you have to do that you would prefer not to do. But at the end of the day, it is still just a game, it is still just a hobby, and it is meant to be stress release. And the second you forget that, the second you let anger, you let the bad thoughts in, the second it becomes a chore, and the second it becomes something that does not bring you joy, it's failing and you've lost. Doesn't matter what the results are, it doesn't matter what the score is. If you are not enjoying yourself and you are not having fun doing it, then you have lost. So that is the first thing, and possibly the most important thing. The second thing to keep in mind is that it takes commitment. Wargaming takes commitment to do. And there are different levels of commitment, and this is not to gatekeep. This is not to say if you don't want to put in 1,000 hours into building and painting a 50,000 point army to put forth in an apocalypse game, then GTFO, we got no room for you here. All it means is you have to keep in mind that when you are wargaming, there is a level of commitment that is required to play it. You not only have to buy things, you have to build things. Perhaps you have to paint things. Perhaps you have to know all the rules so that you can actually play the game itself. All of these things are important to keep in mind, not just for yourself, but also for your opponent. So understand that as much commitment as you have made to this game, they also have to make commitment to play this game. And if you don't respect the fact that they have made a commitment to the game, then you are not being fair to yourself or to them. So understand that this is not just a video game that you can just put into the drive, put up into a universal server and just find some random people to play with and just go for it and just figure it out as you go along. And then if you don't want it, just put it away. In order to play the game, it does take a commitment. You have to be able to build the army. You have to be able to learn the rules to play. And this is not to say if you don't know the rules, then you can't play. It just means that you have to understand that there is a commitment level to wargaming that is not there in other aspects of things that we do. You can go fishing and not have to worry about fishing. You can just sit at a pond that literally has no fish if you just want to sit there and clear your mind. It's very hard to wargame without any kind of commitment. You can download a video game on your phone in like 3 seconds and start playing it and just mashing buttons on it, and it doesn't make a damn bit of difference to anybody. But wargaming, again, takes commitment. Monetary, time commitment, all of the effort that goes into wargaming is something you have to keep in mind. And keep in mind for yourself as well as your opponent. So if you have committed hours of time and money into these things, you have to understand that you need to get out of it what you want. And sometimes that commitment can blind you to what you really truly want to be doing. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you've put into the game, it doesn't matter how many hours building and painting you've put into the game. If you are not having fun and is not something that is enjoyable for you, then it's not something that you should be doing. Not because you're not wanted, not because you're not needed, not because you don't belong, but for you, this is not worth it. And on the other hand, on the other side of the token, your opponent has also put in commitment. They have bought an army. They have built an army. They have possibly painted an army. They've learned the rules and they are playing you in a game that's going to take up a certain number of hours of time for you and your friend to play along with, or you and the person that you met at the game store to play along with. And that level of commitment deserves to be respected. So if you're at the table and you're playing a game, put the text away. You know? Don't pick up their models if you have Cheeto crumbs on your hands because you decided to have a snack. Just because your army isn't painted doesn't mean that theirs isn't. And doesn't mean that they haven't put a whole lot of hours into it. So respect your opponent's commitment. Understand your own commitment. So that the two of you can fully understand and appreciate the game that you're playing. And the hobby that you are doing together. Fact number 3. It requires people and it requires interacting with people. Now, if all you're doing is building and painting, that's what you like to build and paint in peace, and while watching YouTube or listening to podcasts or putting on a movie or TV show, or you like sitting at the kitchen table with your wife or with your partner or your kids or whoever it might be, and just building and painting an army, and you just want to put it up on your shelf, then perhaps it doesn't take people, other than the people that you want to do it with. But if you want to if you want to war game, if you want to play the game itself, it innately requires people. I know that there are single player missions that people can do, and that you can do. I've done it myself, but innately, most of these games require another person to play. And that requires you to understand what that means. You need to respect the other person as a human being. If you are insulting them, if you are giving them the cold shoulder because your dice have gone cold, if you're just sitting there just stewing in your own salt while you're playing this game, you are not respecting them as a human being trying to enjoy the game that you're playing there. You are ruining their time and taking their time and not respecting them as a human being. They are a person that you are playing. And if you continue to do this, you will soon find yourself without other people to play. There aren't as many wargamers out there as there are video gamers, so you can't just like sign onto a server and just play someone in Indonesia. You need to be able to play someone, unless you're in Indonesia, I guess. But the rest of us here, we have to play, you have to play with the person that's across from you. And if your game store only has a certain number of people that are playing, you're going to quickly run out of opponents that are willing to play with you if you make their life miserable. Uncomfortable, boring, just awful games because of your opponent are the quickest way that people don't want to play. And they're not going to play with people that they don't want to play with. So remember, you need them to play. So it doesn't matter how much time you put into that army, how much you theory craft that list, how many GTs it won on the weekend before you were playing. If your dice go cold, if your strategy doesn't hold up, if your opponent just gets hot dice or does really cool stratagems and wins, that doesn't take away from the fact that they are a human being that's playing and wanting to win too. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. And at the end of the day, you both need to have enjoyed the experience. And if you ruin someone else's experience while they're trying to, then you're going to lose the thing that's important for this game, which is an opponent to play with. Especially if you're playing smaller games. You know, Warhammer, there's usually a lot of people that want to play it in your game system. Although I guess that changes depending upon where you're at. But if you're not playing, especially if you're not playing one of the meta games at your location, you're going to require extra effort on your part to make someone else enjoy the system that you want to play. So treat them as a human being. Treat them as you would want to be treated in that situation so that the two of you can have fun and enjoy yourselves. This is not to say that we don't all just have off days. That happens. When it becomes a pattern and you have off days every single time you lose and you have good days every single time you win, people are quickly going to learn that you're not a fun person to play with. Because either they're losing, which innately comes with a bit of a sting, or they're winning and you're taking out all the fun because of how you're acting. They're a human being. You're a human being. Treat each other like you would want to be treated. Because you're both important to each other enjoying this hobby. Because without each other, there's no opponent, and you're left with a pile of plastic, which if that's not what you want, then you're not going to enjoy yourselves. Rule number 4. There is always another game. Now, this is both that there is always another game of the same system that you're playing, as well as there's always another game system out there. So if you're playing Warhammer 40K, and you just can't be bothered to play like a 3-hour game every week, and it just sucks out the energy from you, and you're just like, I love the models, I love the lore, I actually like rolling dice and interacting with people, but like at this point in my life, or where I'm at, where everything's going on here, I've got like maybe 1 hour of intense personal interaction that I can give before I just start feeling drained and losing the enjoyment. Pick up Kill Team. Find a system, find a game, find a lore, find a model that piques your interest. Do you like skirmish games? Do you like grand battles? Do you like fantasy? Do you like sci-fi? Do you like modern? Do you like cyberpunk? Post-apocalyptic? There are games out there for literally everything. And there's always creating more ones. Like I mentioned before, Black Magic Craft is currently working on his game right now. So, and that's dealing with like being in purgatory, which is super cool, super original, and it's awesome. Uncle Adam just came out with his game, which has, you know, you're dealing with demons down in hell. I mean, these are super fun. There's super fun games that are out there for everyone to enjoy with whatever it is that you are looking for. And yes, if you are not doing one of the big ones, it might be harder to find opponents, but then you have to go back to rule number 3 and realize that there are people and they are important to the game. So reach out to them. Find people that you've enjoyed playing Warhammer with and be like, hey, I know we had fun playing 40K. Do you want to try Kill Team? You can use your same models. I'll bring some models. I'll bring the rules and we just play. It's really quick. It's like a 1-hour game. We'll throw down before we play a 40k game. Or we can throw down instead of playing the 40k game. Or we can play a couple games so you can get an idea for how it goes. At that point, if you're playing a smaller game system, or if that's the one that piques your interest, it may require more effort. Uncle Adam always talks about going out and having 2 armies for any of the new systems that he wants to try to get other people into. Because then you have 2 armies that you can play with. Your opponent doesn't have to have that full commitment that we talked about Wargaming requiring. And they'll just have to commit to the time that it takes to play the game and see if they like it or not. And if they do, then they can commit to it more. And understand that if someone else doesn't want to play the game, it's going to require commitment for them to do it. And if it's not for them, if it's not bringing them the joy that they want from the hobby, then you have to understand that that commitment is not for them and that's not what they're looking to do. And you have to be understanding of that. But there's always another game. There's always another opponent. There's always another system. There's always another model. There's always another game. So if what you are doing is not bringing you joy, is not bringing you entertainment, is not bringing you the stress relief that's required, find one that does. Find another opponent that does. Find another game system that does. Find another point level within a game system that does. Maybe 2,000 points isn't your jam. Maybe 1,000 points is, 500 points. Maybe 4,000 points. Maybe you want more commitment into the game and you find someone that does as well and you can play apocalypse games every weekend. Whatever it is, know that there is another game. Once the dice have stopped rolling, there will always be another game that you can find. As long as you respect all the other aspects. As long as you respect other people's commitment, you respect other people's time, and you respect them as a human being. So, find the game that brings you that joy. And number 5, and most important, that kind of fuels everything else that we talked about here, is knowing yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. It's very easy to go into it and be like, oh, this is what I want to do. I've invested a whole bunch into this up front. I want to play with this army in this system, and I want to go on to play at all the biggest tournaments because I want to be a competitive player. Maybe it is. Maybe you luck out and you just guess right immediately, but maybe you don't. Sometimes things change. Sometimes people change. And that's okay to grow, to change, as long as you know yourself. As long as you are honest with yourself and tell yourself what you really want to do. Maybe you really have enjoyed painting. And you've decided that maybe I don't want to speed paint through my armies anymore. I now want to take time to put them out there. Sure, it may take me longer before I can get an actual game in, but that's okay to me because the part that I'm enjoying at this point is painting. Or perhaps it's the opposite. Maybe you're like, I don't feel like spending 3 days painting every single infantry model in my armies. I just don't enjoy the aspect of painting. So maybe you're honest with yourself, cut it back, pick up some speed paints or contrast, and do a quick paint job to get them on the table, colored and painted, and you can play with that. And suddenly you find yourself more enjoying the game aspect than the painting aspect. Or perhaps you thought you liked fantasy. You grew up reading The Hobbit, you grew up reading a whole bunch of, lore about Merlin and Excalibur, Excelsior, that's Marvel. And you thought that what you wanted was sword and shield, bow and magic, high fantasy, elves and orcs. And then you lost interest in it. Perhaps you read Philip K. Dick, watched Blade Runner, and now you really like cyberpunk. Allow yourself to follow that enjoyment. Find a game that uses cyberpunk. Collect some models that are cyberpunk. Allow yourself to explore different avenues of this hobby to find what it is that brings you joy and be aware of what is bringing you joy. Perhaps you tried a very narrative game where you had like one squad in the middle and your opponent just had hordes that were just continually replenishing. There was no way you were going to win on the tabletop, but it was just to have fun and see how long that unit could last. And you had a blast. Perhaps at that point, competitive gaming is not for you. You more like the narrative, more, open play kind of situations. But you'll never know that unless you are honest with yourself and take the time to self-reflect on what it is that you need from this hobby and what it is that you need from basically life. That last one helps with literally everything. Relationships, work, everything. So, if you don't know yourself, how can you ever know what it is that you want to get out of this hobby? So take the time, take the effort, and take the self-reflection to figure out what it is that you need. And then make it happen. So those are my 5 key aspects of wargaming. I know a lot of them could pertain to a lot of aspects of life, but they are very pertinent to wargaming because our hobby is niche. Even the largest, YouTube channels that follow within our hobby are minuscule compared to like most, video game channels or blog channels and whatnot. And that is not to say that, YouTube is the final arbiter of all things with the hobby, but it is important to know. And as big as Games Workshop is, Magic the Gathering is way bigger, And these are things to remember, things to keep in mind, that we are a niche. And in order for our niche to flourish and for us to enjoy ourselves and find the fulfillment from this that we are looking for, we need to be aware, we need to be courteous, and we need to be honest. So do it. Go out there and have fun, find your fun, and find what works for you. Do you have any other things that you think are very key to wargaming in general? Or maybe to a specific system? I don't care, I want to hear it. I want to know what you guys think about wargaming. What keeps you going? What keeps you fueled? Where do you find your fulfillment with this hobby? Let me know. Down below in the comment section, because comments also help. Comment for the algorithm god, as I was told by a fan of mine. So, I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.